Advanced TV Herstory, the podcast that brings you fresh perspective on the importance of TV in our lives. We tell stories of leadership, persistence, and achievement of TV women, because in the lives of women, no other media platform has influenced or inspired so many. Lo, these 60 years. Women of all ages have been impacted by what they've seen and will see on TV. So join us for a little advanced TV herstory by streaming it directly on our website, tvherstory.com, or anywhere you find podcasts. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams. Welcome, TV Herstorians. I'm going to put in a plug for this e-newsletter. Let me tell you, just go to cynthiabemisabrams.com or tvherstory.com and sign up. It comes out every month or so, or whenever it is that I feel that there's something relevant to say or share, and something that isn't so worthy that I produce it into a podcast. Like, let's talk about Liza Minnelli's life on TV, not film or stage, mind you. I came to this realization that we needed to have this talk, listeners, in a newsletter earlier this spring. Following the Oscar presentation that featured Liza Minnelli in a wheelchair. Hey, it was supposed to be a director's chair. And Lady Gaga, oh my gosh, she's so respectful. You know what? My Twitterverse erupted. That eruption was multi-layered. And it speaks a lot to where American society is with its regard to ableism, ageism, loyalty, opportunism, and all of the rather unsavory aspects of show business and celebrity that we live with today. Folks were criticizing others for finding it disrespectful that Liza was on stage in that condition, that she didn't have agency. Or the other side firing back that celebrating 50 years of Cabaret, Liza can be on any stage she wants to be on, so long as she wants to be there. You get the picture. My goodness, such energy that was expended over just that moment on TV. But it got me to wondering about Liza's TV vault. We know her from her film work, and many were fortunate to witness her successes on Broadway. There was a time, listeners, when Liza Minnelli was a very big deal. Now, for Judy Garland, Liza Minnelli, Lorna Luft fans, 2022 has been a jubilee year, and it's only half over. Judy, Liza, and Lorna, and the Queen of England. Let's have a jubilee. Liza is celebrating 50 years since Cabaret was released, which was her big break film. If you haven't seen it, you have to. Judy would have turned 100 in June, and Lorna Luft, who is often considered the lesser talent of the three of them, but is younger and in better health than Liza, led the Judy celebration in June through events and performances and interviews. Now, for many reasons, and we don't have the time to get into them, Liza Minnelli has held her personal thoughts and experiences largely to herself. There has been no big reveal from Liza. She's highly protective of her parents' legacies and has given her blessings to very few books, films, and documentaries about them. In fact, Liza's own life has been more chronicled in movie magazines and tabloids, often using Judy's tragic ending as the backdrop for the salacious sightings of Liza during her addiction and poor health periods. As second-generation Hollywood royalty who was born famous, her marriages, divorces, her entry into rehab, her comebacks, her weight, her health, they all became public fodder, whether she wanted them to or not. And so, listeners, there's not much to work with that is credible biographical information. There are two unauthorized biographies which guided my research, or at least pointed me in the direction of the time that Liza was on TV. Neither of these biographies, I'm going to tell you, I would recommend. I just don't. So instead, let's fill in the blanks of Liza's career the way that we can see them, the way that they're documented today on the internet, often with video. These are the moves that, in a sense, made her talent accessible to households around the world, and they are memorable and, in many cases, available. So let's just start off at the beginning with one of her first TV performances, which is available on YouTube, and it's 1963 when Liza appeared in the Judy Garland Christmas episode. The Judy Garland show was on in 1963, 1964, 26 episodes. I've done a 5-part series on the Judy Garland show because it is such a treasure to find, a treasure of TV legend right there. So see the Judy Garland Christmas special during the holidays or on YouTube anytime. You know, it's in a classic variety show format, and it primarily showed off Liza for her dancing, not so much the singing, because they had to farm out some singing so that Lorna Luft and Joey Luft could have some songs, and there were some great guests, Jack Jones and Mel Torme, really kind of smooth dudes. And of course, Judy needed the time to sing Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. So 5 stars to watch that any time of the year. It will make you feel good, and it will also help you understand just the tremendous talent involved with Liza Minnelli. 2 years later, 1965, not even 2 years later, Liza's career has picked up. At 19, she was the star of the Broadway show Flora and the Red Menace, and she became the youngest recipient of the Tony, and yet even later that year, she was in this rather quirky, made-for-TV special called The Dangerous Christmas of Red Riding Hood, or O Wolf, Peter Wolf. With music by the renowned Jewel Stein, this is 19-year-old Liza starring as Red Riding Hood, surrounded by people dressed as forest animals. It's black and white, and it's less than an hour long, and it's available on YouTube. This show is also a great time capsule of primetime network programming that was targeted to families back in the day.
There they are. Pretty as a picture. You'll notice, however, that Mother is doing all the work while Red Riding Hood is dreaming at her mirror. But that wasn't enough for her. Oh no, it's sheer vanity. She dreamed of being a ravishing.
Oh no, look at this coat! Mommy, I've got something really to wear on Christmas. Like a lovely red ball gown. Thank you, darling. I hate to leave someone ball early, but you're best my chinchilla. Tomorrow I'm riding cows at dawn, and I shall bag me a box. Now we go. Are you ready?
So from the mid-60s to the late 60s, she was a frequent guest on British and American variety shows, singing and dancing and performing in light skits with the likes of some pretty big names like Cliff Richard, Ed Sullivan, Danny Kaye, and Carol Burnett. Now, there's no denying that Liza Minnelli, daughter of Judy Garland and Vincent Minnelli, lived in a celebrity web, and to some degree we don't know the extent of that web, that celeb web, as it were. As a guest on anyone's variety show, this 20-something Liza brought maturity and connection to old Hollywood and a polished voice and presence that would appeal to families and older viewers. She was a gold standard for a 20-something. There was no risk. She, more so than Lorna, who is about 7 years younger than Liza, reaped the goodwill of relationships connected in some way to her parents. One of those relationships is with Elizabeth Taylor. And we'll mention Elizabeth Taylor a little bit later in this episode, but I will say that it was never more apparent than when it was reported that none other than Elizabeth Taylor counseled Liza to check herself into Betty Ford in 1984. So these connections and this presence on Broadway, the Broadway audition that she did for Cabaret, she did not get the role of Sally Bowles on Broadway. And these TV gigs, Liza was honing her vocal and her dancing strengths. Now, for more of a look at pre-Cabaret Liza, which is, a place on the spectrum, check out this very quirky YouTube episode of the Anthony Newley TV special from 1971. And it's on YouTube, and the guests are Liza and Diane Carroll. If you don't know who Anthony Newley is or was, he was a British singer and a songwriter and an actor who is reminiscent of a Tom Jones or an Engelbert Humperdinck. Sorry if you're too young and you don't know who those men are. They were very smooth crooners. They were international. Now, the show's writing and musical selections, which were supposed to highlight Anthony Newley, were really very awkward and simplistic. And so I overlooked that. And instead, while I watched, I was just fascinated by this whole Liza-Diane Carroll connection. Diane Carroll had guested on the Judy Garland show, episode number 20, which aired in early 1964. By then, Diane Carroll had already become the first woman of color to win a Tony for Best Actress in a Musical in 1962. And by the time this 1971 variety show appearance happened with Liza and Anthony Newley, she had won a Golden Globe for her groundbreaking role as Julia. Now, watch a piece of the video, and let me tell you, you're going to agree with me that it was too bad that the network, well, the dudes in the network, had there been women in the network, they would have looked and they would have said, oh my God, ditch this Newley dude and have Liza and Diane co-host. That might have changed everything. For Diane Carroll's time on TV sunsetted from the end of Julia to her gutsy telegram in the mid-'80s to Aaron Spelling. Now you're saying to me, what gutsy telegram? Okay, it's the one that she wrote to Aaron Spelling, who was producer of Dynasty, and said, basically, I'm not quoting here, Aaron, I loved watching Dynasty, but you need a woman who can be a glamorous foil to Joan Collins's Alexis. I am that woman. And you know what? Spelling hired her in a heartbeat. Oh, and who was Anthony Newley married to when Diane Carroll was on his show in 1971? Joan Collins. Diane Carroll, Judy Garland, Liza Minnelli, Anthony Newley, Joan Collins. Don't tell me it isn't a small world. Now, the other thing you'll notice about Liza's appearance on the Anthony Newley TV special is her rather shaggy mullet. It's kind of a bit of a klute, I think. Likely this was taped following Liza's completion of Cabaret, but before its release. So it's quite possible that she didn't want to reveal the signature hairstyle that emerged from Cabaret, or maybe she just looked at it and she felt that the Cabaret look was not stylish enough. Or maybe she was trying to look like Jane Fonda from Klute. I'm not sure. Okay, so there we are, 1971. 1972 is the release of Cabaret in movie theaters. And lo and behold, it was at this time as well that she earned her Emmy for her televised concert, Liza with a Z. And by the time you see that, and it's available on DVD, bits of it are available on YouTube, the Liza look was locked up. Both the film and the TV concert were choreographed by Bob Fosse, and so in this moment, in 1972, Liza was pretty much cast to the world as the most innovative, the greatest woman singer-dancer of her generation, or at least we could say of that piece, the oldest piece of the baby boom. The Liza look became black and white and red very consistently. That was her brand. Halston Designs, that iconic hairstyle, which she only subtly strayed from over the years, very subtly. Even most recently, it's that same Liza look, very reliable. So yeah, Cabaret premiered in February of 72. Liza with a Z aired on TV in September. It was Liza's year. Now, listeners, let's pause the timeline for a second. By 1973, Liza was 3/4 of her way to an EGOT, an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony, and was not even 27. Think about it. But for the rest of her singing and recording career, an earned Grammy would never come. Why? Because Grammy Awards are about record trends and sales and radio play and popularity. And Liza's work had largely been the American songbook and show tunes. Lo and behold, in 1991, she received the Grammy Legend Award, making her an EGOT asterisk. That's nothing to sneeze at. It's just a note. But I've been thinking a lot about this aspect of her career, that there was so much talent, so much recognition in some ways, that yet her work is trapped in an expectation and a style which she crafted, that if it's what you want or need, you need Liza Minnelli, you need a belter, then she delivered. and she could be counted on to bring along a few famous friends who owed her favors. That was the stratosphere that she lived in and she wanted to live in. Later in the 70s, like so many stars of the 20th century, Liza appeared on a 1979 episode of The Muppet Show. Now, this show's theme it had kind of a noir feeling, the 30s and 40s kind of throwback. And that's because it was part of that Liza look and vibe that followed her fairly well-known film New York, New York, which co-starred Robert De Niro. There are clips from this episode of The Muppet Show on YouTube, and one includes Liza singing and dancing to Barry Manilow's hit Copacabana. Now, I often consider investing in the DVDs of this entire series because we're never going to get to see The Muppet Show replayed on TV. But what a wonderful binge for the next pandemic lockdown, or what a wonderful treasure trove available for any young viewer who unfortunately isn't necessarily going to understand who all these old people are, but may in fact develop an appreciation for show tunes and corny humor. Okay, moving on from the Muppets. Liza's next big appearances on TV were unique for entirely different reasons. And it was 1980. The advent of cable. Cable was starting to change everything. But in 1980, and you can catch it now on YouTube, there is a special called Goldie and Liza Together. Yes, Liza teamed with Goldie Hawn, who had by then stretched well beyond her laugh-in period, to star in a number of popular movies. But did we ever know Goldie could sing?
I'm doing a special with my friend Liza, something I've always been anxious to do. But I watch her work and my head starts to rattle like something was loose, like for instance a screw. She moves like the wind and she sings like a bird. If my eyes are big, well then hers are absurd. When we're side by side, she'll destroy me, I'm sure. A Liza like that makes a Goldie like me insecure. Goldie, blonde and adorable, lit by some interior spark. I feel when I'm standing next to her, how can I say it? Oh, I don't know, dark. Lively, witty, darling, antic. My eyes are big, but hers are gigantic. When we're side by side, I'll be shattered, I'm sure. A Goldie like that makes a Liza like me insecure.
The show's premise was that Goldie and Liza were putting on a show, kind of a California-New York dichotomy. Blonde, brunette, nutty, serious. And they were just 6 months apart in age. So from whatever you probably are thinking that there was a gap in their singing talents, let me assure you that Goldie Hawn actually surprises as a versatile performer. I encourage you to check it out on YouTube. Watch it for all of the cultural touch points that 1980 had to offer, including a dozen male dancers showcasing Goldie's version of YMCA. It's not lost on me that this was a year before the first reported cases of HIV and AIDS. Or as one person commented on the YouTube page that this video is available on, watching this made me even gayer than I was before. Thanks a lot. This is now getting us into a theme and a part of Liza Minnelli that I don't think anybody has really given too much thought to. Or when I say anybody, I mean people who are not necessarily super fans, but rather women who think of Liza Minnelli and think of her best films and everything. What is the depth? What is the meaning? And why doesn't anybody ever talk about it? Well, partly because she doesn't. So conversely, same year, 1980, we saw Liza hold her own with international superstar Mikhail Baryshnikov in a made-for-TV special called Baryshnikov on Broadway. It was a music and dance special, as you might expect. Russian emigre Mikhail Baryshnikov was at the height of his career, and he was joined by Liza and another Broadway star, Nell Carter. Nell Carter. Oh, yes. The woman who was minutes away from being cast, or should I say tropically typecast as a black housekeeper on TV's Gimme a Break. Yes, if you were a very celebrated Broadway star that you could belt a song and entertain audiences for weeks and months on end, where should you next go? Oh, you should become a housekeeper on this corny sitcom called Give Me a Break. You're a woman of color. But getting back to Baryshnikov on Broadway, again, Liza and Nell they delivered. They belted the show tunes, and Baryshnikov had a decent voice, surprisingly. See it for yourself on YouTube. And then, when you're watching, enjoy not only Baryshnikov's legendary talent, but also see for yourself that Liza really could keep up, even with someone of his dancing stature. And then think about, as I was doing, looking back on Judy Garland's early career in films, the MGM movie musicals that were cranked out at factory speed and put so much pressure on her to not only do a lot of dancing, by the way, alongside Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly, and doing that dancing in high heels, but that in addition to all of that, she was also doing all of the songs and cutting all of those songs in the recording studio all in the same time period so that they could be released literally within a matter of months. So you look at Liza's work in Cabaret or any of this other variety show performing level, Broadway, and you realize that she held that similar multifaceted talent and energy that her mother did. But like athletes, and because we never saw her mother age appropriately, dancers who perform at that level eventually break down. And Liza's TV appearances in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s were becoming fewer. She had a role in The Princess and the Pea, which was part of a children's series produced for cable in its early days. She had a dramatic lead in a made-for-TV movie called A Time to Live, in which she played the mother of a child with muscular dystrophy in 1985. You know, that sort of breakthrough awareness that was so much a part of made-for-TV films. And it's available in 3 parts on YouTube, and an appreciation at the TV accessible level of Liza's acting. But it was 1992, and the BBC had produced and aired a Freddie Mercury tribute concert. And who led the 72,000 assembled at Wembley Stadium in London in a rousing 7-minute dramatic sing-along of We Are the Champions? Well, that's our Liza Minnelli. Catch bits of this. I don't believe you can see the entire concert, and it was a star-studded concert, but catch it on YouTube, or at least Liza's part, because Liza she led the finale of rock icons George Michael and Elton John and Roger Daltrey, Robert Plant, Guns N' Roses, Annie Lennox. She led them in We Are the Champions. Now, by 1992, HIV and AIDS was known. It had already rocked the entertainment world with the deaths of Freddie Mercury and Rock Hudson. And literally when the concert was filmed, it was just months after that Liza's first ex-husband, Peter Allen, passed of the disease. Now, in a 2011 interview with the UK Daily Mail, and the link is in the show notes, Liza said she helped Elizabeth Taylor understand the disease that Elizabeth Taylor did not realize was taking Rock Hudson before their very eyes. It was a very quick sort of slide. Rock had drifted away from the public eye, and all of a sudden, Elizabeth Taylor emerges from this mist and goes on to become an early and visible HIV/AIDS activist and a fundraiser, and she continues to have a foundation dedicated to that. Many of the people involved in the foundation are Elizabeth Taylor's grandchildren, and Elizabeth Taylor was on stage, or at least near the stage, with Liza that night at Wembley. I encourage you to watch the clip. This is Liza with 30 years of stage presence closing out an unforgettable event.
I know there is one person in the world that Freddie would be very proud to have stand in his footsteps tonight. And she's here. Ladies and gentlemen, Liza!
Now, in 1995, she co-starred with Shirley MacLaine in another made-for-TV movie, The West Side Waltz. And amazingly, or ironically, or coincidentally, it was these old Hollywood connections combined with a story of aging women and their hopes and dreams and how society valued or didn't value their lives that just left me thinking about Shirley MacLaine and Liza Minnelli in 1995 and their talent and their near invisibility. Now, the last real sighting of Liza on TV never actually happened, but it was talked a lot about. It was 2002, at the start of her last marriage. This to entertainment mogul David Gest, G-E-S-T. And about that time, like so many C-grade celebrities, they were going to produce a reality show about their life, Liza and David. I guess the Kardashians sort of outlasted that whole effort. They are now the gold standard. Anyway, this pilot of Liza and David never made it to the air, and for that I am thankful. So believe it or not, very few TV sightings since. That brings us to now, with Liza's appearances in film and Broadway and a little bit role on some of her probably more favorite TV shows. But the world has, for the most part, not really had the opportunity to see Liza at her best for any extended period of time. And so instead we focus on the lives and loves and the problems of celebrities who are 50 years younger than she is. And so it was a bit of a surprise when she is wheeled onto the stage at the Oscars in a wheelchair, and clearly not in her up-to-snuff Liza way, but she's 76 years old. With that, listeners, I guess I'm left with the thought that we live in a time where, in all walks of life and for all sorts of reasons, people are standing up. The people who came to Liza's defense or were arguing one position or another, they care. And they are willing to stand up physically, or at least through writing. They want to stand up to the bullies and the people who are thoughtless, who speak before they really understand what they're speaking about, who are dreadfully uninformed, or whose own self-esteem issues lead them to belittle others. It's definitely a different time. And this one little microcosm of moment of Liza on TV brought this to my attention. So when you go onto YouTube and you're going down that rabbit hole known as Liza Minnelli, which it's worth, do it on a day when you are fed up with streaming and you can't find anything on cable to watch and you're looking for good entertainment. Goodness gracious, go over to YouTube, do your searches, whatever it takes, and pull up some Liza and draw from her strength and the love of life you see in her face and the amount of work she puts in to this legacy of professionalism that the world expected of her, that was handed down to her from her hardworking parents. And draw on that energy and conviction to take on or ignore the bullies as you see fit. Be a loyal friend. For her own accomplishments, Liza Minnelli is a national treasure. Listeners, this all came out of an e-newsletter, so I encourage you, if you want to see the germination of future podcast episodes, do subscribe to the newsletter. You can do it at tvherstory.com. You know, Advanced TV Herstory at this point now is really just looking for the best stories that can be told. If you've got ideas, send them to us at advancedtvherstory@gmail.com. The music you're hearing in the introduction and this closeout music is Jazzer, Take Me Higher, found at Free Music Archive. Listeners, it has been a distinct pleasure checking in with you in the summer of 2022 on something as important as Liza Minnelli's career on TV and what it means for the American songbook and show tunes and belters everywhere. We are not done appreciating her while she's still alive. So you know what? This is why I podcast. Go get yourself some Liza Minnelli. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.